I will call to order the Monday, July 28th meeting of the Verona Common Council. We will begin with the Pledge of Allegiance, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Next, we'll have the roll call, please. Ms. Schofield, if you would.
Alderperson Diaz.
Here.
Alderperson Linder.
Here.
Alderperson McGilvery.
Here.
Alderperson Reekie. Here. Alderperson Steiner.
Here.
Alderperson Touche.
Present.
And Alderperson Yurs.
Here.
Alderperson Doyle is absent and excused tonight.
We have a quorum, so we will proceed with the agenda. Next on the agenda is public comment. If there is anyone from the public that wishes to speak this evening, we would ask that you would come forward to the podium. There should be a sign-up sheet if you would sign up and provide your name and address for our benefit and those watching at home. Is there anyone in the public that wishes to speak this evening? Anyone from the public that wishes to speak? Seeing none, asking third time, seeing none, we'll move on. Included with your packet were the minutes of the July 14th meeting. What is your pleasure?
Move to approve.
We have a motion by Mr. Touche. Is there a second? Second by Ms. Reekie. Were there any additions or corrections to the minutes of the previous meeting? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. That motion carries and the minutes are approved. Under Mayor's business this evening, I have two things. First, this is something we had on the agenda at a prior meeting, but Rita was not able to make it that evening. So I have a proclamation that I would like to read this evening. And this is a recognition of service for Rita Martin. Whereas the City of Verona and the Fitch-Verona EMS Commission congratulate Rita Martin on her retirement from Fitch-Verona EMS, and whereas Rita Martin received her initial emergency medical technician license in 1977 and eagerly became an original member of Fitch-Verona EMS, and whereas Rita Martin remained dedicated to protecting all citizens throughout Fitch-Verona district boundaries for 37 years, even running the ambulance out of her own driveway on holidays during the early years. And whereas the service Rita Martin provided reached far beyond the district lines as she helped educate a new generation of EMTs at Madison Area Technical College. And whereas Rita Martin has served her community with humility and distinction, always ready to provide whatever is needed. Now therefore be it resolved that the City of Verona and the Fitch-Verona EMS Commission want to express our gratitude for and the recognition of Rita Martin's commitment to service. That would be signed this day, the 28th day of July 2014, by myself as the mayor and Chief Merland as the chief of Fitch-Verona EMS. So I would ask if Rita, if you'd come up, please, and I know that there's some pictures that may be taken. You may have a few words. I'm not sure. I didn't ask you if you wanted to say anything. But a little bit before Rita does that, we've talked, the proclamation is regarding her retirement with EMS. I had the privilege, when I first got on the council, to serve on the EMS commission, and later, and a few years later, as the treasurer for Fitch-Verona. Rita was always there. She was always there. But one thing that we didn't talk about tonight is the service that you and other members of your family have also given to the fire department. And for a long time, you served in a great capacity there and helped us out. So I wanted to thank you not only for your service with EMS, but also with fire. So Rita, do you have any comments you'd like to make?
Just thank you, and I've really appreciated it, and I will continue on. I know I'm with the police department doing a lot of things, and City Hall, and taxes, and everything else. So I'll continue volunteering through Verona, and I don't plan to leave anytime soon.
Well, thank you so much.
you.
Can we possibly get some pictures? We can take a little break here.
Go.
I saw some cameras, so.
My husband, of course.
I think we also need to note too that Rita was one of the main people in our tornado relief, working with the families at the church, making sure they provided shelter and a meal, and also providing meals to emergency personnel.
The other thing that I wanted to mention this evening under Mayor's business is Chief Coughlin reminded me that on August 5th, from 5 p.m. to 9 p.m., we have it's the 31st annual National Night Out Against Crime, which is, it'll be held up here at the Hometown Festival Park. Meet your local police department, sharing the fun with your entire family. It gives a list of things that it's included, but I know the favorites for a lot of people that attend are displays from Verona Fire Department, Fitch-Roanoke EMS, Wisconsin State Patrol, as well as the Department of Natural Resources. So whether you have been there in the past or you have not been there, please attend. It's a great function, and a lot of work is put on by the police department, a lot of support in the community to put that event on. So please attend and show your support. Mr. Yours.
And could I just add that there's no cost to the event? I might have missed that, but I want to make sure people know that, you know, all the food and all the entertainment is free to the public. So please come and meet these people that protect us and provide a great service.
Thank you, Dale. Okay, that concludes my business for this evening, so we'll move on to the administrator's report. Mr. Burns, please.
Yes, thank you. A couple updates this evening. First, the Dane County Cities and Villages Association held a membership meeting last week. Several items were discussed as part of the agenda, and I did email out an update to the council members earlier this afternoon. Topics included the Capital Area Regional Planning Commission budget process, DaneCom communication system, and 911 center and dispatching times. The organization also approved their budget for the coming year, and as part of that included an increase in the dues structure, first dues increase since 2010, and part of that is intended to build up reserves and have dollars available if there are legal issues for the association to get involved with in situations where it's more effective for the association to take on those challenges rather than each municipality incurring those legal costs. For the city of Verona, the cost increase is going to be about $810, which includes both a recalculation due to our population growth since the last dues increase, as well as the change in the rate structure. So that's something we'll look at as we start putting together the budget for next year. A couple other items. The City of Verona will be hosting a discussion with Dane County Emergency Management and other area agencies related to our response to the tornado event. That'll be held here at City Hall on August 7th from 2 to 4 p.m. and intended to be a panel discussion kind of discussing how City of Verona responded to that tornado, and something that can be used as a learning event to communicate with other agencies in the area about lessons learned and how the community as a whole in Dane County can respond in any future incidents. And then finally, the ridership for the Metro bus service serving the Epic campus in the city of Verona has continued to increase steadily, and the city of Verona has been working along with Epic and Madison Metro to provide expansions to that service, and just recently Epic has agreed to fund an additional morning trip on the express route, which services downtown Madison and the city of Verona. So there will now be 4 a.m. trips rather than just 3 to help meet the demand for that service, primarily for Epic commuters. And with that, I'd be available for any questions.
Are there any questions for Mr. Burns? Not seeing any. Thank you, Bill. Next, we will have the engineer's report. Mr. Gunlock, please.
Thank you. First report this evening is on Lincoln Street reconstruction. Contractor has been replacing the street crushed aggregate base course. They were down to Oak Court, had completed Oak Court, and were to complete Lincoln Street today, leaving only Holiday Court, which will be done over the next 2 days. String line for the curb and gutter will be placed on the east side of the street on Wednesday, and curb and gutter on the east side is scheduled for placement on August 4th. String line on the west side of the street will be set later next week, with the curb and gutter being placed the week of August 10th. Finished grading for the street will follow the curb placement, and then asphalt paving. All work is scheduled for completion by September 5th. Scenic Ridge Phase 6. Sanitary sewer and water main construction has been completed except for about half the water services. Currently, the contractor is working on storm sewer and waiting for a safe water sample so he can replace or install the rest of the water services. Work on this phase of Scenic Ridge will continue till later in September. Cathedral Point Phase 4, site grading continues on the south portion with sanitary sewer construction started on the north portion. Work in this subdivision will go till late October or early November. And finally, Prairie Oaks Phase 3, contractor has completed the placement of the crushed aggregate base course material on the streets and is preparing to place the curb and gutter at the end of this week. Finished grading of the streets and asphalt paving will follow over the next couple of weeks, and all work in this development should be completed by the end of August. That completes the report for this evening. If there's questions, I'd be happy to try to answer them.
Are there any questions or comments for Mr. Gunlock? Not seeing any. Thank you, Bob.
Welcome.
Next, we will move to the committee reports. We'll begin with the Finance Committee. Mr. McGilvray, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Under item 9A1, I'll make a motion to approve payment of the monthly bills in the amount of $501,127.09.
We have a motion by Mr. McGilvray. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Linder. Mr. McGilvray?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. In the way of explanation, three of the larger items from this month's bills, first being to Haversley Stone for the Lincoln Street reconstruction project, $52,282.25. Second, to the Metro Transit System, which is our second quarter investment in a partner share, $71,800. As Mr. Burns had alluded to, that is something that is a pass-through with the TIF, or excuse me, with EPIC. And secondly, or lastly, to the Madison Metro Sewage District for our second quarter 2014 sewer service, $207,285.72.
You have heard the explanation of the major expenditures. Are there any questions for the committee or for staff? Seeing none, the motion is to approve the payment of bills in amount totaling $501,127.09. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Motion carried and the bills are approved. Mr. McGilvray?
Thank you. Under item 9A2, I'll make a motion to approve Resolution R-14-039, rescinding Resolution R-14-012, amending the 2014 City of Verona budget.
We have a motion by Mr. McGilvray. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Mr. Linder. Mr. McGilvray?
In the way of explanation from this week's memorandum from Mr. Burns, the City of Verona Common Council approved the resolution R-14-012 approving an amendment to the 2014 City of Verona budget to fund a compensation survey and classification study. The funding of a compensation survey and classification study was not included in the 2014 originally adopted budget. The council at that time approved a budget amendment on April 14th, which had the impact of reducing the fund balance by $14,875. Upon further review by staff, there is a concern that as a result of approving the resolution, it may disqualify the City of Verona from receiving the 2015 expenditure restraint state aid payment. The actual amount of the expenditure restraint payment for 2015 is not yet available. However, a reasonable estimate may be used on the 2014 payment of $176,006. The city is able to fund the compensation survey within the originally adopted 2014 budget. However, based on the 6 months actual expenditures, the administration adopted budget is projected to be underexpended by nearly $26,000, which is a result of accounting assistant position vacancy during the first quarter of 2014. Approval of the resolution R-14-039, rescinding resolution R-14-012, secures the city's qualification to receive 2015 expenditure restraint state aid payment and help us with our budgeting process.
You've heard the explanation of the motion. Are there questions or comments? Questions or comments? My only comment is that this was a good catch. It was a very good catch by city staff, so that we didn't have that penalty of not getting the expenditure restraint program. And there was something else I was going to say, but and I was going to say I believe that the process that you're using to rescind the resolution is the appropriate manner to do it too. So it's very clean that we did the right thing. Mr. Burns?
Yeah, I just wanted to add that I agree. I think that this is the cleanest possible route for us to go. The city does have the ability that you can amend the budget to include a project that wasn't originally authorized. However, we just wanted to make it very clear that in authorizing that project, we were not increasing the total expenditure level, which could result in jeopardizing that program. And when I discussed this with Cindy, it was her recommendation that we take this method, and I agreed. I figured that let's be extremely clear about it in order to not create any potential concerns in the future. So that's the reason for the recommendation.
Thank you, Bill. Other questions or comments? Mr. Diaz?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm just wondering what we can do in the future not to have to do this again, if there's any way to prevent this, or is it just kind of...
Mr. Burns?
Yeah, I think there's a couple things that we can do. I think first of all, kind of as a policy, we can clarify what level of authority we have to modify the use of funds within a department budget as long as we are not increasing the total expenditures for that department. Second, if there is a situation where we do feel that we need to do an amendment to authorize something that wasn't originally anticipated, make sure that we're very clear on the language that's used in the original amendment to clarify that it's approving the project but not modifying the expenditure authority.
Seeing no other questions or comments, the motion before you is to approve Resolution R-14-039. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. And that motion carries. Mr. McGilvray?
Thank you. Under item 9A3, I'll make a motion to accept the 2013 audited city and utility financial statements by Baker Tilly Virchow Kraus, LLP.
We have a motion by Mr. McGilvray. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Linder. Mr. McGilvray?
Thank you. Earlier this evening at the Finance Committee, Baker Tilly Virchow Kraus presented the 2013 audited financial statements to the Finance Committee. The statements included a clean opinion which indicates that they fairly represent the city's financial position in all material aspects. Baker Tilly did prepare a separate document for the city utilities and the city's general financial statements. The City Council would at this point be advised by the committee to accept the audited financial statements for 2013.
Thank you, Mr. McGilvray. Are there questions for the committee or for staff? Questions or comments? Just a comment that I would make is that we heard from the Baker Tilly staff, again, which we hear this every year, that our staff does a tremendous job in providing the information that is necessary to conduct the audit. There were also comments and graphs and charts to back up the comments that they made regarding the strength of the financial condition of the city. So each one of the alders has received a copy of the audits of the water and sewer utility as well as the general budget. So if anyone has any questions as you read through those, please feel free to contact us. With no other questions, I will call the question on acceptance of the audit. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Motion carried. And Mr. McGilvray, anything else from the Finance Committee?
I think the only thing I would add that I was kind of impressed by, other than the fact that I know the staff does a great job, and Baker Tilly again told us that, was, you know, for a city our size to have only 5 journal entries, which basically is a correction or an alteration to some information that was entered to begin with, is a pretty rare thing, and something that the city in general should be very proud of the staff, that they're that diligent to make sure that the entry as it goes in is the correct entry. So, you know, 5 is a great number to be at, and I think they indicated that's something that they rarely see for a city our size.
Thank you for that feedback. Okay, we will move then to Public Works, Sewer and Water Committee. Mr. Touche.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Under item 9B1, Public Works decided to table this item for a future meeting.
Okay.
There's no action.
Item B1 has been tabled. Go ahead.
Under item 9B2, I would like to make a motion to approve the professional services agreement for the design and bidding service for Liberty Drive, Phase 1 street lighting.
We have a motion by Mr. Touche. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Diaz. Mr. Touche?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The design bidding is, the work is to be done to light Liberty Drive, and it's not to exceed $19,850.
Okay, and do you want to have that included with your motion?
I do.
Okay.
Thank you.
Mr. Diaz, you're okay with that? Okay. Other questions or comments for city staff or for the committee? The motion before you is to approve the professional services agreement for the design and bidding services for Liberty Drive Phase 1, street lighting at a cost not to exceed, and Evan, what was that number again?
$19,850.
$19,850. All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Motion carried. Mr. Touche?
Under item 9B3, I would like to make a motion to approve the professional services agreement for a water system master plan.
We have a motion by Mr. Touche. Is there a second? Second by Mr. McGilvray. Mr. Touche?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The master plan, our last time we had it done was 2006. Since then, we've added over 1 million gallons of water storage. We've added 16 miles of new water mains, 188 new fire hydrants. Basically, the plan we have right now is a little out of date. It's difficult for us to do the modeling. When we did the plan originally back in 2006, it cost us about $53,000. This new plan to have it done will cost us $66,900. For us, we really need the plan done so that we can do modeling for future growth in the city.
You've heard the explanation from Mr. Touche. Are there questions or comments? Are there questions or comments? And
Mr. Mayor?
Go ahead.
Where, does this come out of the utilities budget, or where does the money come from?
It does.
It does come out of the utilities budget. And a question for Mr. Touche and Mr. McGilvray. Are you agreeable to have the amount in here not to exceed $66,900 in your motion?
I am.
Okay, we'll include that with the motion. Other questions? Questions or comments? Seeing none, the motion before you is to approve a professional services agreement for a water system master plan at a cost not to exceed $66,900. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, no. Motion carried, and that has been approved. Is there anything else from Public Works, Sewer, and Water?
No more.
Thank you, Mr. Touche. Public Safety and Welfare Committee, Mr. Yurs, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Under 9C1, we have, I make a motion to approve a liquor license premise amendment for a rib cook-off at the 5th quarter on August 23rd.
We have a motion by Mr. Yurs. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Diaz. Mr. Yurs?
The Public Safety Committee met earlier this evening, and after speaking with the applicant and having a strong recommendation from the chief, there really was no issue. This is just an extension of their current license, so really the people who are involved with the cook-off will be able to take a drink that's served inside the 5th quarter out to the area that they're cooking. The license amendment will last from 7 A to 7 P. However, that's just kind of a time. This is the first time they're doing this, so that time will probably be shrunk for the actual event, but they didn't want to get into the problem of needing more time, so they asked for a little bit more than they needed, which the committee was fine with.
Thank you. You've heard the explanation from Mr. Yurs. Questions or comments for the committee or for staff? Seeing none, the motion before you is to approve a liquor license premise amendment for a rib cook-off event on Saturday, August 23rd at the 5th quarter. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, no. And that motion carries. Mr. Yurs?
Thank you. Under 9C2, I'd like to make a motion approving ordinance 14-848, amending section 13 of chapter 1 of title 10 of the Code of Ordinances, motor vehicles and traffic required stops.
We have a motion by Mr. Yurs. Is there a second? Second by Ms. Reekie. Mr. Yurs?
Thank you. This ordinance approves the addition of east-west stop signs at the Meister subdivision and the removal of one set of previous north-south stop signs. The stop signs are to occur at the intersections of Breckenridge Road and Jenna Drive, creating a four-way stop, and Jenna Drive and Glenwood Drive, where the previous north-south stop signs had been removed. Essentially, after construction was completed out in the Meister subdivision, we no longer needed both intersections to have stop signs. And after discussion with Chief Coughlin, we felt making the Jenna Drive intersection with Breckenridge a four-way stop due to the park there and the added pedestrian traffic and traffic of children.
Thank you, Mr. Yers. You've heard the explanation. Mr. Linder, please.
Just for a little clarification, it says in Jenna Drive and Glenwood Drive, those two don't meet, I think, because that's supposed to be Breckenridge and Glenwood on your description. It says,
yes.
So the north-south stop sign at on Breckenridge would be moved at Glenwood, and it would be moved to the Glenwood.
To Jenna.
I'm talking about Glenwood and Breckenridge.
Yes, so that there's no longer the stop sign on Breckenridge.
At Glenwood.
At Glenwood.
It's
Correct.
at Glenwood going on to Breckenridge.
Correct.
Yes.
Okay, we're clear
Just
on
for
that?
clarification.
Okay, thank you for the clarification. Any questions or comments from the council? If not, the motion before you is to approve ordinance number 14-848. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. And that motion carries. Anything else from Public Safety and Welfare Committee?
Nothing further.
Okay, then we have new business, discussion and possible action regarding awarding bids for the fire EMS facility project, bid package number 2. Mr. Burns, if you would, please.
Yeah, thank you. For the fire and EMS facility, the bidding was done in 2 packages. The City Council has previously taken action on bid package number 1. Items for bid package number 2, which is the bulk of the construction trades, were due on July 15th. We have those results in, and we have Steve Gausman from Five Bugles Design and Bill Penoyer from Tri-North Builders here to present the results and an update on where we're at as a result of those bids. The items were reviewed by the Ad Hoc Public Safety Committee on July 17th, and the consensus of the committee and the project design team is that for some of the bid items, we are recommending that the council take action to award bids to the low bidders. We also had some items where we did not receive any valid bids, where the only bids that were received were either late or did not have the required bid bond. Those are some of the lower dollar amount items, and we are recommending that we reject those bids since they were not qualified and rebid those. And there's also 3 items where we did receive at least 1 valid bid, but we are going to be recommending that we make some modifications to the scope, try to look for some areas of cost savings and rebid those items as well. And we'll walk through item by item what the recommendations are. We do have copies of some materials that go through the bid results and the project budget updated. And Bill, maybe if you have the other copies, if anyone does need a hard copy or would like a hard copy.
I've got some extra too, if anybody needs one.
Yeah, and just before Bill starts walking through the individual results, in general, we did receive bids that were higher than our project estimate. After the bid package number 1 items, we had revised the budgetary estimate, and this is shown on the white sheet. Shows the estimate from June 23rd, 2014. At that point, we were at an estimated total project cost, including construction, soft costs, furnitures, fixtures, equipment, and everything, at about $10.4 million. Based on the bid results, we were over by approximately $500,000. We have been going through and our consultants have been going through and looking for areas of potential savings. That's something that we'll address. But we are at the projected cost based on the bids at about 10.7 right now. And there are some other areas we're looking at for potential savings and some alternate bid items, and we'll walk through those individual items and recommendations.
Sure.
This form here, this is what you just handed out, Bill, the bid pack 2 results. Basically, we had it broken down by work divisions. In addition to that, we solicited for combination bids or complete bids on the entire bid package, contracting number of general contractors, as well as posting in all the trade journals for bids. Across the board right now, we're finding that it's getting very difficult to get bids right now, to get the kind of quantity bids we were receiving just a year ago or even a couple of months ago, because all the subcontractors just are so busy getting their work done and never really ramped up since the recession. So they're busy getting their work done, and it's difficult to get a lot of people, smaller contractors, to get bids out right now. And in addition to this, one of the hurdles we knew we were going to have was a lot of the smaller contractors and some of the bid categories that we'll talk about are not capable of getting bonds, especially if they have other municipal type work going on and they require bonds for those. They have limited bond capacity, so that prevents them from bidding, which is the reason why we put it out there for general contractors to bid the entire bid package. That way they could get bids from contractors that could not provide a bid bond, and hopefully we thought maybe that would be a cost savings, but as we'll see here in a minute, that really didn't pan out. So the form here, if you have a colored copy, the ones we have highlighted in yellow are the low bidder and the ones that we are recommending to move forward with at this time. We felt that the numbers were close to the budgets, that everything was proper in their bid, and in a lot of cases the low bidder was the same bidder that also gave us budgets on the documents as we progressed. So there's a confidence there that they certainly understand the job and are interested in the job. I would mention too that I think across the board, the contractors that we have listed as low bidders are very good contractors. I think again across the board we've got a good group of low bidders here, so that's one of the positive things. So masonry, we're recommending Cornerstone. Their bid was $1,029,000. It's about $18,000 under the budget. Steel, we had some bids that were furnish only and some that were install only, and then Cullen and Findorf both bid as a combination, furnish and install. There's a lot of steel people who only bid furnishing and some that only bid install, which is why we accepted. Unfortunately, the low bidder on the furnishing material did not have a bond. So that would have been a low bid with the install, but they didn't have a bond. So as a result, Findorf was actually the most qualified low bid for a furnish and install at $717,000. And that's a category that we do need to get on board right away, because steel takes a while to get shop drawings and submittals, and then to get the steel ordered and fabricated on a job site. So that's probably of the group the most critical from a time frame. Carpentry, Vogel was the low bidder there, within $5,000 of the budget, so we're recommending them. Waterproofing, we only had one bid, and there actually is only one or two contractors out there that do that type of work, and they're both small companies. So it wasn't a surprise that they couldn't get a bond. What we've talked about in this case, because the waterproofing goes on right after the foundation, that if this bid could actually be given to Findorf, and then we could have Findorf, provide a cost as a change order, and then we wouldn't have to bond them. They essentially would be bonded under Findorf's bond. So that's, kind of the recommendation we're going with there, because there just isn't, a number of bidders out there, and any of them are going to get a bond. So that's what our thoughts were on that strategy. Roofing, a couple of the ones coming up, roofing and glazing systems and drywall assemblies. The drywall was one that was significantly over budget, and this was a lot to do with scope changes with the exterior cavity wall construction. So what we're recommending there, working with 5 Bugles and doing some design detail changes, nothing that would affect the integrity of the building or the appearance, but some things that we think we could save some money, and for that reason we're recommending that we would rebid those categories. So that would be, again, the roofing. We had, the low bid there, again, couldn't get a bond, so I think if we had a little more time, we can maybe solicit some additional roofers, and we would check in advance to make sure they can get bonded, so that, we don't get bids in without a bond. It's just a waste of everybody's time. And then the same thing, like I mentioned, with glazing and aluminum systems. We did have 2 qualified bids, but we think that scope of work may change with this whole envelope change, where we're looking at some cost savings. Overhead door, this number in there, I'll point out, is with the alternate bifold doors included. I know at the last meeting that seemed to be the preference of the committee and certainly of the chief. So we included that in the number here, and depending on if that alternate is selected or not, would determine who the low bidder was there. So that's one thing we'll have to talk about, is the alternates. I'll get through this and then we can touch back on the alternate. Hard tile, that's ceramic, porcelain type tile. We only had 1 bid and they did not have a bond, and this is another category. These are typically kind of smaller contractors that we don't think there's a lot of guys out there that can get a bond, so we're going to be making a lot of calls and find out who could possibly get a bond. So that when we rebid these numbers, we know for sure we've got 3 or 4 people that are going to bid it and can get a bond, or else a certified check is another option. So that's kind of the strategy with hard tile. Acoustical ceilings, we had plenty of numbers, all real close to the budget. We're recommending Badger. They were the qualified low bidder. Resilient carpeting, we had a couple bids. So we're recommending the low bidder there. There's no really change of scope. And one thing with regards to the finishes, like painting, flooring, ceilings, we didn't find that there was really many opportunities there to value engineer to rebid that, because they're pretty standard finishes, all durable, long-lasting, but nothing that's really extravagant. Elevator, we had 2 bids, recommending Tyson Krupp. There was a low bid under budget. Fire suppression, we had a number of bids there, recommending the low bidder, U.S. Fire, lower than the budget. Plumbing, again, we had decent coverage there, recommending Pertzborn as the low bidder. HVAC, we're recommending Harker, they're the low bidder. Again, they did the budgets for us. Electrical is Electric Construction, they're the low bidder. And I will mention, with regards to plumbing, HVAC, and electrical, because some of those numbers went up, and basically because there was a significant change in scope from the time that the budget documents were out there. So we had them right after we got the bids and looking through for value engineering suggestions, and then we had conference calls with the engineers and these contractors last week, and we identified some pretty significant savings that are still being kind of kicked around. We'll have to kick those around with the city engineer and the chiefs as well. But we do anticipate some savings there, and to follow proper protocol, what would happen is they would be awarded as the low bidder, and then there would be a change order for the value engineering suggestions. So that's how that's moving forward. Earthwork was bid pack 1, so was asphalt. Landscaping, we only got 1 bid there, and that didn't have a bond. And again, we anticipated the same thing, that landscaping is not a type of contractor that probably typically can get a bond. So we'll have to, again, search out and try to find, at least 3 or 4 landscapers that can get a bond and bid that work. And then lastly, site utilities was South Central, and they are also doing the earthwork package from bid pack 1, which makes that really convenient because they're already doing the earthwork. There's no finger pointing of any scope that's in between that's missed, so we recommend them. They're another contractor we need working pretty soon. As you can see, we've broken ground out there, and there's underground utilities that'll be going in with the foundations. So as Bill mentioned, we were over budget, and we have some strategies. One is the value engineering, and rebidding some of these categories. And then the thing that we'll need to decide on is the alternates. they're listed here. You can see like alternate number 3. The first one would be the fire pole, which is the $39,833 that Volgo gave us because they're the low bidder. There's a glass partition. This essentially is in the museum area of the fire station. The chief has said it's not something that's an essential. We could also take it out, of the budget, and it could be placed in the contract as an alternate. So if, say, at the end of the project or towards the end of the project, there's money left in contingency and that was still a desired item, that we would already be locked in at that price that would go in the contract, as if at any time the city selects that, they would hold that price. And the same thing, there's an acoustical partition that divides the training room. That could also be done at a later time, to see again where the project ends up with the contingency. The next one, alternate number 5, that's really the big one. That's the bifold doors. Substantial number there for the bifold doors at the front, $199,000, and the bifold doors in the rear are $149,000. So if the desire was to get back to the number we were at previously, this is really where it would have to happen in this essentially $350,000 savings. So that's, something that we need to move forward on. The PVC roofing, I think that was something that was misunderstood. That should have been a savings there, and one of the reasons we're going to rebid the roofing. And something that the diesel generator, which is, I'm sorry, I skipped over the geothermal. There was 2 alternates in there, and the first one, which with Harker would be $3,500, is the geothermal field right now essentially is in a location that if the theater was ever built on the site, there would be an issue with that parking. So there was an alternate in there to put the geothermal in a configuration that essentially overlaps the town property towards the ice rink. And that is the preferred location, and the cost is minimal, but I don't know, Bill, if you want to talk any more about that process.
Yeah, that alternate would place the geothermal area on the very southern end of both the fire station as well as the ice arena lots and the drainage way. It's in an area that essentially is unbuildable because it's a drainage area right along the path. It shouldn't interfere with the operation of the ice arena. And just had a preliminary conversation with the town administrator and the town board chair. Don't anticipate that being an issue, but we did want to clarify with the town before we finalize that design location. I think assuming that the town, and I should add that the parcel where the ice arena is located is jointly owned by the city and the town, and that's the reason for including them in the conversation. Assuming that is acceptable to everyone, it makes a lot of sense that it's underneath a drainage area, and for $3,500 of additional cost, it keeps us the options open for that site rather than restricting the potential use of the southern portion of the fire station site.
And then the other one was for a vertical geothermal that takes up the least amount of space, but the cost is substantial. And if alternate number 8B, essentially, I should say 8A, is selected, I think everybody feels that's still in a location that would not affect any sort of future development, that it's kind of unlikely that area would ever be developed. So that was kind of the recommendation going forward there. And the last one, the diesel generator, that's one we would be recommending. That actually should be a negative in there. There's a cost savings for going with the, what is a diesel generator? The cost goes up substantially with gas generators. And this was one of the reasons that the electrical came in substantially over budget, because when the electrical contractors put together their budgets, it was based on a 100K generator, which was basically for life safety and so that the fire station could function. But after that budget, there was further discussion to put the entire fire station on a generator, which jumped up to a 260K generator, and generator costs kind of go up exponentially as the size goes up. So that raised the cost quite a bit. A diesel generator is considerably less expensive than gas, which is why we put that in as an alternate. So between the plumbing savings and the electrical savings, that's about $65,000 to go to a diesel generator. and there doesn't seem to be any objection with the design team or the chiefs going to a diesel generator, so that's a alternate savings we would recommend.
Go ahead, Mr. McIlroy.
Thank you. So at the ad hoc committee level, my understanding was that there was some increased cost to using the diesel, though, per the specs from electrical construction. What they were saying they would have to do to support that diesel generator, or did I?
No,
completely-
the alternate stands as it is,
Okay.
with that as a negative number, so.
Right, and the other question we had that I had discussed with you about was the opportunity or the ability to possibly have 2 generators out of a smaller capacity, supporting, rather than having the exponential cost of a 260K.
Mhm.
Did it work to have them at 2 of them at a smaller, to
We haven't-
achieve the same
yeah.
thing?
We haven't gotten that cost back yet. We got some preliminary information in, and they're still working on some additional savings, and there's going to be some ongoing dialogue on some of these other ideas, so we don't have that number yet.
Okay. And then if I could,
Go ahead.
Mayor, this refers back to the waterproofing. One of the discussions we had at that ad hoc committee level meeting was the legality of placing the H2O, the waterproofing under the Fentorf contract for the construction of the concrete. And did you get any information on that?
Yes, I did review the bid results and the recommendations with the city attorney earlier today, and he was comfortable with that item being a change order to the concrete, given the size of that compared to the size of the total concrete bid from bid package number 1.
Okay, and refresh my memory, were there 1 or 2 contractors on that? I know Zander was one, I couldn't remember if there was.
Just one.
Just the one?
Yes.
Okay, so we don't have there wouldn't be a conflict where we were picking one or the other, so that's
No, because there was only one bidder.
the only one. Okay, thank you.
Go ahead, Mr.
Yeah,
Burns.
I just wanted to add, and then discussing this with the city attorney earlier today, he was comfortable with the recommendation that in some of these areas where we had adequate coverage and valid bids, proceeding with awarding the low bid. And for the other items, just to clarify, the reason why we would need to go through a complete rebid process is there is a requirement that there be a bid bond in order for bids to be a valid bid. So for a couple of the items where we did not receive a bid bond, hard tile and landscaping, for example, he did feel that we do need to rebid that and either try to obtain bids with a bid bond, or there is a procedure in the state statute that allows for a certified check to be provided, so that for some of those smaller contractors, it may be more feasible for them to provide a certified check in the same dollar amount that you would provide as a bid bond, and then that check would just be returned to them once the bids are submitted and the low bidder is determined. So that might be a more feasible method, and that's something that if we do go through the rebidding process, we would try to work with contractors, explain the process, and make sure that they are comfortable with one of those 2 options so we get an adequate number of bids in. So I think the items for discussion tonight is, a couple of potential actions. If there is comfort in proceeding with several of these items, there could be an award of bid for several of the categories to the low bidder. For some of the other items that Mr. Penoyer walked through, we'd be looking for a recommendation to reject bids and direct staff to rebid those items. And then the other decision point is talking through the alternates. And certainly the big one in terms of dollars is the bifold doors, but I think we'd be looking for some direction on a couple of the other alternates as well, of given where we're at with the budget, what is the feeling about those alternate bid items?
Bill, anything to add at this point?
No, I don't think so. I guess should just mention right at the bottom of the second sheet was some combined bids we had received, but we did take a look at those combinations, and if you added up the individual bids, they were lower, so there wasn't any financial benefit to any combined bids.
Go ahead, Mr. Burns.
I guess just one additional comment that I did have, looking at the white sheet that summarizes the budget and the column with the estimate for today's date. It does include under the construction estimate an estimated $200,000 of value engineering savings. Those are from some of the items that Mr. Penoyer was related to the electrical, the HVAC, and the plumbing trades. We are hopeful that with some of these other items, particularly if we modify the scope and rebid it, that we would see some savings in there as well. I don't know what those dollar amounts would be, so we have not put an estimate in there. We're also going to be reviewing the other items category on here, which includes furniture, fixtures, and equipment, and see if there's any potential savings on some of those equipment items, and still you meet the intent to make sure that the facility is functional. So at this point, you know, the estimate is about 10.7 million. We're hoping that we can get that down. Obviously, the big dollar costs that we have available as an alternate is in the bifold doors, so we should have a discussion about those. There's a lot of merits to those, but obviously they're a more expensive system. But based on the estimate where we were at about 10.4 million back in June, there are likely going to be additional savings, but just to make it clear, we don't anticipate getting that number back down to 10.4 unless we were to take the bifold doors out. You know, we'll see some additional savings, but probably not getting it all the way back down to that 10.4 million level.
Thank you, Bill. We will open it up for discussion now, and I'm just, you know, looking so we can proceed here. I'm looking at the email, Bill, that you sent out this afternoon to the council. And from what I'm reading from this, is there's a number of, and we could go through and read them, and we should if the motion were to be made, awarding the bids to the low bidders. On the bottom of that section, it talks about the overhead doors, and depending on the selected alternative, I'll just be very loud and very clear that I think that we're only, you know, we're going to build this building one time, and the right thing to do is to do the bifold doors on the front and the back. That's my opinion, but that should be open for discussion. The other things in here, we're talking about considering modifications to the scope and rebid in those two areas of the glazing and aluminum systems and gypsum board and insulation, the drywall, and the roofing. Rebid also because no valid bids were received for the hard tile and the landscaping, and then consider a change order to the concrete contractor for waterproofing and weather barriers. I mean, to me, it seems pretty simple, the actions that we need to take, but I think there may want to be some discussion on the bifold doors. But I believe very strongly that we should do the bifold doors, both in the front and the back. So let's open up for discussion. Discussion, comments, Mr. Yurs?
Sure, thank you. I agree with the bifold doors, especially in the front. I mean, you might be able to get me to listen to taking out the bifold doors in the back, because for much of the back, to a degree, some of those vehicles would be responding in an emergency fashion, but a lot of those, if we're going to be using it as a drive-through bay, you know, the major apparatus will be returning through those doors and not exiting out, if I'm correct. So I do think it's imperative that we have the front doors be the bifold, because that's where your initial truck and the ambulance are going to exit out of the building. And the case has been made sufficiently enough for me to support the bifold doors there. You know, I'd be open to also taking out the fire pole and looking at contracting for that glass partition, but not necessarily completing it right away, but just kind of leaving it there for a future date if it does become something we want to do. But I'm also interested to see what others of you have to say about the bifold doors.
Ms. Reiki?
Yeah, my comment on the bifold doors would be to keep them in the front for sure, but then any that don't have vehicles exiting out the back through the doors, I think should not be bifold doors.
Comments, questions, Mr. McIlvray?
I'm gonna agree with you, Mr. Mayor, on the bifold doors on both sides. Just for the consistency of the building, I think it makes sense to do it that way. There may be, having different doors on the back, even if you don't have all the same style doors on the back side, I think there's a different look, but not more than that, probably a different functionality to the building. And I think the mayor's point that you only build it once, you should build it right. And you know, we're not talking a lot about this, but there's some significant savings over the life of that building that related to the cost of heating the building if you use the bifold versus the regular roll-ups. And you also have to factor in the fact that those doors in the back will have issues because of the size of them. They're going to have issues with maintenance on them. So yes, the upfront cost is X, but the long-term cost of those buildings, whether it's through the environmental loss of the heat in the building or just a maintenance cost, I think is fairly significant. And I think the life of the building and the functionality of it, I would recommend that we go with the bifold front and back.
Thank you, Mr. McGilvery. Other comments, questions? Mr. Diaz?
Thank you. I just had a clarification question. Under the fire suppression bid, it says the low bid with U.S. Fire is $93,700, and it looks like Monona has $74,000, or am I misreading something?
Let me check that. I think there might have been something with the low bid, but I'll verify that.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions, comments? Mr. Linder?
I got a couple questions. So some of these people are bidding with no bond. Why would they do that if they know we need to bond it?
That's a real good question, because we were making, like 4 of us in the office, lots of calls the whole 2 weeks that this was out there, essentially to, many dozens of bidders, and explaining that to them. And it gets back to, I think, the initial statement I made, where subcontractors are just really busy right now with work they have going on, and I think they got to, which is typical, 2 days before the bid's due, and they just read, oh, we got to get this price in, Tri-North sent us an invitation, they don't read it, they just send in a bid. That's, and not to be critical, but that's kind of what happens.
So how much do they need to send us? Like if they don't get bonded, but they do a certified check, is it like a percentage of what the bid is, or what?
Correct. Right.
How much is that?
Well, the bid bond was 5%.
Okay. You said also on the, I think it was the HVAC was up significantly because of changes to scope. What changes exactly are you talking about?
Well, with the geothermal system, which is very conducive to doing in-floor radiant heat, which was something that was very important to the chief from a safety standpoint, that in the apparatus bay there is radiant heat in the floor, which is going to melt any snow or anything that comes in off the vehicles and make for a safe surface to walk on, that you don't have ice and snow and water out there. The radiant heat is also on the current plans through a great deal of the office area, and that's what's being looked at as a possible cost savings of taking some of that radiant heat out of the office area.
I don't know if we're talking about the fire pole yet, but I'll throw my 2 cents. I think we should do that. There was significant time savings for response time savings, like for the fire pole when the people are upstairs. I think for $40,000, that's gonna be money well spent. As far as the doors, I agree with the front door, the back door. I would probably also agree with putting that in. I agree with a lot of the comments that Mr. McGilvery said. So that's all.
Other comments, questions, Mr. McGilvery?
I'm going to take the easy fruit, the low-hanging fruit here, and make a motion to approve a change order. Since the legality of the change order allowing Findorff to pick up that contract for the waterproofing, I'd like to make a motion that change order be allowed at this point.
We have a motion by Mr. McGilvery. Is there a second? Mr. Burns?
Yeah, and I just wanted to clarify, we probably would need a separate action in the future to approve the change order. I think at this point, and if I understand this is the intent, would be rejecting the bid for the weatherproofing and waterproofing and proceeding with the change order strategy. And we'll get the actual documentation and bring that back.
If that's the case, we don't have to, I could withdraw the motion at that point then, because if we're going to reject, we might as well reject all the bids that don't qualify.
Mr. Linder, you okay with that? I'm sorry, Mr. Yers?
My question, do we still need the motion to reject the current bid then?
Mr. Burns?
I think you will need that motion. I think it's just a question if you want to do that by individual item, or I think Mr. McGilvery was suggesting perhaps there could be a different motion to reject bids across multiple categories where we didn't get valid bids.
Never mind.
Questions, comments, potential motions? Mr. McGilvery?
Thank you.
I'm sorry. Mr. Giver first, Chief Giver?
Just wanted to address a couple things with the bifold doors and the fire pole. The bifold doors on the rear, right now, we're only gonna have 2 vehicles that are gonna respond out the rear. I don't know what we're gonna have in 10, 15 years. There could be more. With using the station as a drive-through station predominantly, when we leave the station to go on the call, we're gonna go out the bifold doors. They're gonna close quickly, maintain the heat in the building in the wintertime. When we come back, we're gonna come around to the back of the station and enter through the rear doors. And if we don't have the bifolds in the rear that time, we're gonna open that slow overhead door, let all those heat savings out that we saved leaving to the call and lose on the way back. So I think the bifold doors in the rear are important. I'm discouraged at how high the cost came in for the entire project. I'll just say that. It's discouraging to see that, but it's what it is. And the fire pole, as Mr. Linder says, does save over 20 seconds on our response time getting out the station. As I said before, the National Fire Protection says fire doubles in size every 30 to 60 seconds, depending on the conditions. And to save 20 seconds out of our 60 seconds to 90 seconds for turnout time for EMS and fire calls is a substantial amount of time saving. $39,000 just doesn't buy you a hole with a pole through the floor. It is a system that has a door that closes on the bottom. That door is a fire barrier and vapor barrier from the apparatus bay. So it's more than just a hole with a pole going through it. It's a very sophisticated piece of equipment, and I think Mr. Gausman could back me up on that. And if you have any other questions, I'd be more than happy to respond to them.
Thank you, Chief. Mr. Burns?
Yeah, just while we're on the topic of the fire pole, I just to make sure all the information is available, we did contact our insurance carrier, Cities and Villages Mutual Insurance, and asked them if they have any recommendations on fire poles. The comment that I did receive back is that they would not recommend it due to potential safety concerns. And what they're concerned about is if you have a firefighter that's responding, they go down the pole, twist an ankle, have some other type of injury. They have one member currently that does have fire stations with fire poles, and they pulled some loss history there. There have been several incidents over the years. Thankfully, all of them have been minor. They're not going to tell us that we can't install that. That's a local decision, and I know that current fire poles are built to modern standards, and they try to make them as safe as possible to try to address those. As a design team, we didn't come to a consensus on either recommending for or against. Obviously, the chief has indicated his position and the issue about the response time, but I just wanted to make sure that people were aware of that comment as we're evaluating whether or not to include the fire pole.
Mr. Yurs?
If we did put in the fire pole, how would that affect the price of our insurance?
Mr. Burns?
It would not affect the insurance cost. The potential issue would be if there is an injury, and then we would have either that impacting our workers' comp mod factor, or if it were a severe injury where somebody were disabled and not able to work and had a duty disability claim. But the actual cost of the insurance itself would not be affected by whether or not there is a pole in the station.
Mr. McGilvray?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Burns, I wonder if you also ask them if there was a change or an increase in falls due to the stairs, and if there would be, I mean, the recommendation I'm sure at that point would be to have a flat building and have no stairs at all, because I know people fall down the stairs and there are significant injuries from that too.
Mr. Burns?
Yeah, I did ask them that question. From the information that they had, they did not identify that there was any increase in injuries due to stairs, and I've done some looking. I've asked the insurance company. I have not found any good studies that look at safety of pole versus stairs. Obviously, injuries can occur on either, and I would say too that whether you have a pole or stairs, those are not the primary areas where firefighters are injured. If they're going to be injured, it's much more likely they'd be injured in other locations rather than a pole or stairs. So that again, it's a recommendation. Looking at it from a safety side, I think in the grand scheme of all of the safety risks for fire, it's a relatively minor risk, and we have to weigh the cost of the pole, the potential safety issue versus potential response time. And that's weighing all those factors, and without a conclusive study, that's part of why the design team didn't come to a set recommendation for or against it, but just wanted to raise the issues.
Questions, comments, potential motions? Ms. Reiki?
I'm just wondering about the stipulations once a pole is put into a fire station, if employees are required to use it to save that 20 seconds, and how that works when there's, 6, 7 people trying to go down the pole at the same time, or if certain people are designated to use it and others are designated to use the stairs, because to me that's a big safety concern.
Chief Giver?
No one will be required to use the pole. I think most of the people would want to use the pole. I can't say that for certain. You're probably going to save even more time if you have 6 people in the station. Some use the pole, some use the stairs. Generally, we're not always together in one big group. They're coming from the workout room, the day rooms, the bunk rooms, that type of thing, spread out a little bit, except for maybe during the dinner hour. So I don't know if we're going to have, I don't think you'd have 6 or 8 guys trying to get down that fire pole at the same time. I think they're right next to each other. They'd see if there's too many guys going down the pole, they'd go down the stairs then. And we'll have procedures in place for safe use of the pole and who can use the pole and things like that. People won't be able to wander in the station and just slide down our fire pole or anything.
Mr. Burns?
Yeah, I will say from some of the research that we've done on fire poles that we would want to have policies in place that anyone that would potentially be using it is trained. It's relatively simple, but just to make sure that proper procedures are being followed, and you would not want any non-trained people using the pole, so it's not something that would be available for the public or other people touring the station.
Questions, comments, potential? Mr. Diaz?
Thank you. I remain skeptical of the fire pole. However, with the fire chief's recommendation, I'm not going to object if people want to include it. I think having multiple systems is really key, because then people can just use whatever they feel more comfortable with. It makes the whole fire station more resilient. Whereas if there was some obstruction on the stairs, there'd be an alternative way for people to get to the trucks. So I remain skeptical, but I'm not going to object if people want to include it.
Thank you, Mr. Diaz. Mr. Touche?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And comments about the doors, specifically the rear doors. The concerns about the temperature loss if we have slow doors in the back. I agree with that comment, but also whether it's a bifold door or a standard door, when you're bringing a frozen fire truck in, you're going to have temperature loss. And I don't think, in my opinion, the difference in temperature loss will be that great. You're vacating the air in the space by opening the back door, but now you're bringing a frozen vehicle in that you're going to raise to some comfortable temperature. I think you're losing lots of energy regardless. I do agree with the aesthetics perspective. This is a long-term building. I'm on the fence with the comment. I don't really know if it's really worth putting the back doors in other than for aesthetics. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Touche. Mr. Yurs?
How expensive would it be to add in the bifold doors at a later date? Kind of like we talked about with that glass partition, not necessarily do them right away. Is that a major cost to change the style of door? I mean, if we need to find areas to save right now, we may be able to upgrade to those doors later on.
Bill or Steve?
Go ahead. The replacing the doors, actually the sensors and having the conduits in place and the bollards out in front for the 4-fold doors, which use different types of sensors, would be actually more problematic than actually, we're dealing with a rough opening 14 by 14, whether we put tracks on the inside or rails across the top. That's you could certainly do it. You'd have more cost into it. For what it's worth, we were talking about it as a sideline, and we were kind of in half just saying that you couldn't really call a $25,000 door a cheap door, but they are our bid price on those 10 doors is substantially cheaper than what we had budgeted for. Typically, we budget around $35,000 a door, and it's our history that's what they came in at because of the number, because of the competitive bidding. For whatever reason, you had very favorable pricing on the overhead or on the bifold doors.
I think just the other comment would be the steel framing around the opening actually is different on a bifold door versus an overhead door. So you might have to change some, some steel jambs that are, again, around the perimeter of the door if you did at a later date.
Mr. Linder?
Chief, did I catch it right? You said that there'll be some vehicles heading out the back doors for calls? To
Correct.
start with two,
At this
is that
time,
correct?
Tender 8 and Brush 6 would be responding out the back doors.
Some of the responses will come out the back, and in the future, you don't know if more could potentially be.
It's
going out the
possible.
back.
I have no idea for sure, but the potential is there. And having different doors operating differently could potentially cause some confusion and maybe a mishap. Hard to say.
Somebody's expecting a bifold open, and they get the other one, and they get a little too.
And you drive through one of those overhead doors, the glass panels are $5,000 to repair just one panel, I believe, and that doesn't include the cost of the apparatus that gets damaged and out of service.
Okay.
I mean, it's
Thank you.
Other questions or comments? I guess an additional comment that I have on the bifold doors is I always believe that we should learn from our mistakes. And when we talk to other people that have built fire stations, at least to the fire chiefs that we've talked to, without exception, we have heard that for the ones that did not do the bifold doors, that if they were to rebuild, they would strongly recommend that bifold doors were installed. So I really think it's a wise decision. I know it's more money. I know that, we're looking if there's areas to cut that we would cut, but I really think that the bifold doors are something that we should move forward with, both in the front and the back of the building. Other questions, comments, Ms. Reiki?
I just think we are at a point where we need to cut what we can cut, and if it's not interfering with safety, I think it needs to be cut. I think people that I've spoken with and who've emailed me are very flabbergasted at the price of this building, and I mean, I'm all for energy savings and making sure that our fire and EMS personnel are well cared for so that they can care for the rest of us. But if it's not going to interfere with that, then I think we need to make the hard cuts. And I often see the fire station doors open just throughout the day anyway, so I don't know that energy savings argument is really a strong one.
Thank you. Mr. Diaz?
I got a question on something that was said previously about extending the radiant heating for the HVAC system into the office areas. What would be the benefit of that? Like, I understand the benefit if it's in, like, for the fire truck so people don't fall, but, like, what's the benefit?
It's really a comfortable heat. Probably the biggest benefit of it. It is conducive to doing a geothermal system because essentially you're heating with, piped water. But it is more expensive. Projects I've done using it, the users have commented on how comfortable and quiet, obviously. I mean, it's just a very nice heating system.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Diaz. Questions, comments, potential motions? Mr. McIlvray?
So, would it be appropriate then at this time, Mr. Mayor, to make a motion to reject all the bids that did not meet the requirements of the requested bid package?
Go ahead. Mr. Burns?
Yeah, just to clarify the bids that we're talking about, the ones that are recommended to be rejected would be hard tile and landscaping where no valid bids were received. And then also to reject and modify the scope and rebid the glazing and aluminum systems, gypsum board and insulation, and roofing and sheet metal.
Mr. McIlvray?
I would make a motion then at this point to reject those bids as mentioned by Mr. Burns.
We have a motion by Mr. McIlvray, seconded by Mr. Yurs. You've all heard the motion. Further comments or questions on the rejection of the bids and rebidding? Seeing none, all those in favor of that motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. And that motion carries. Comments, questions, potential motions? Mr. Yurs?
I don't want to do this, completely piecemeal, but since would it be appropriate to award all the bids that aren't necessarily attached to an alternate? The low bids.
Mr. Burns?
Yeah, I'd just like to go through and clarify which items those would be. And my understanding is that would be masonry with Cornerstone, steel with Findorf, acoustical ceiling systems with Badger, the resilient and carpeted flooring with Hughes Flooring, elevator and conveying systems, Tyson Krupp, fire suppression, US Fire, and just with a note that we're going to clarify the reason why Monona was not included for that as a qualified low bid. And
Site utilities.
Site Utilities South Central.
Yeah, I'd like to make that motion with the red bids awarded.
Motion by Mr. Yurs, is there a second? Second. Second by Mr. McGilvray. Questions or comments on that motion? Mr. Diaz?
Thank you. A clarification, when you say we're gonna clarify why Monona wasn't selected, what if there was no reason, like what if that is actually the low bid then?
Could just make a recommendation that be the qualified low bidder for fire protection, and we'll just clarify that.
So
As
I
opposed to
think-
naming a contractor.
That's exactly what I was going to say. Without naming, in that
Right.
situation, you would say the lowest qualified bidder.
And I'm comfortable with that in the motion.
Further questions, comments? You've all heard the motion. Signify, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. And that motion carries. So Bill, can you give us a rundown of what is left as far as the alternates then?
Yes, for carpentry and specialty. Excuse me, yep, with carpentry and specialties, the alternates that are affected there are the fire pole, glass partition, and acoustic partition. And I think with the glass partition and the acoustic partition, the recommendation is that we can wait on those items. The fire pole is the item for discussion. For the overhead and apparatus four-fold doors, the issue is the bifold doors at the front and the rear. Plumbing, the affected alternate is the diesel generator. And also for the electrical communication and wiring, the diesel generator, as well as there are some items from the fire pole and bifold doors that also affect the electrical contract. HVAC, the alternate affected is the geothermal loop or vertical loop. And I believe those are all the items. Is that correct, Bill?
Mr. McGilvray?
Mr. Burns, are those individually numbered? Is there a way to flesh those out? I don't have that document in front of me.
Sure. And yeah, maybe if I can just go one by one. So the first one, package number 6, carpentry and specialties. The low bidder is Vogel, and the amounts for the alternates for the fire pole is $39,833. For the glass partition, $18,841. And the acoustic partition in the training room, $19,661. For the next item that is affected, that would be item 8.3, overhead and apparatus four-fold doors. And Bill, correct me if I'm wrong, it looks like Collat is the low bidder. Is that?
Yes, correct.
So the amount of the alternate items is for the front four-fold doors, $199,401. For the rear, $149,551.
Right, I do want to state again that those alternates, that is not an additional, but that is included in the current budget.
Yep. Jumping to item 22, plumbing, AJ Pertzborn is the low bidder. The diesel generator would include a deduction of $12,000. For item 23, HVAC, Harker is the low bidder. The recommendation is to include the geothermal alternative loop. I would say subject to confirmation and approval with the town, and I don't think we need to finalize that as part of the action here since it doesn't affect the low bid, but the potential alternate there would be $3,500. For item 26, the electrical and communication wiring, electric construction is the low bidder. That again would not be affected by the alternates chosen, but the fire pole is an addition of $1,500. Bifold doors would be an addition of $2,500 for both the front and the rear. And then the diesel generator is a deduction of $52,500. And I believe those are all of the modifications.
If I could just make a comment. 3 of the categories, the plumbing, HVAC, and electrical, are trades that are needed pretty quickly, probably already, I should say. I would just make a suggestion that because we have these alternate prices, if you proceeded with those commitments based on the base bid without the alternates, and the alternates were included in the contract, or they weren't included, but there was verbiage in the contract that stated should the city select or reject these at a later time, the amount would be such, whatever they bid us at.
Mm-hmm.
So you're really not committing to the alternates, you're only committing to the base bid.
Thank you, Bill. Questions, comments? Mr. Yurs?
I'd like to make a motion to approve bid number 23, the HVAC and temperature controls to Harker, while using alternate 8A, the geothermal loop.
We have a motion by Mr. Yurs. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Linder. Questions or comments on that motion? This is specific to the HVAC. Seeing no questions, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye. Aye.
Opposed, no. That motion carries. Mr. McGilvray?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Under contract package 22 plumbing, I make a motion to approve alternate 9, which would be the diesel generator as it relates to that plumbing package.
We have a motion by Mr. McGilvray. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Yurs. Questions or comments on that? It's on item 22, and it would include alternate number 9. Ms. Reekie?
I just had a question about the idea of the 2 generators. Was that part of this item that was going to be looked into a little more?
Bill?
I do know that it's not going to be less, because I think it would probably
be more, yeah. Mr. Gunlock?
If you put in 2 generators, you got 2 transfer switches, you got 2 sets of wires, everything is doubled. And you're gonna spend more money than the 260 kVA set.
Yeah, that's initially. Again, they're putting together some pricing, but that was the anticipation.
Mr. Linder?
Thank you, Mayor. So for the alternate 8, the electrical portion of it is significantly higher?
No, it's going to go, that's minus 52,000.
Minus 52,000. Okay. That's good to know. Thank you.
Mr. Touche?
So if we accept the alternate, does that mean it comes in under our budget?
By those 2 amounts, correct. You would save, if we go with the 260K diesel generator, you're going to save 12,000 in the plumbing and 52,500, so it's a net savings of $64,500.
So that's 64,000 under the 502, or?
Well, I'm adding the 52,500 and the 12,000 in the plumbing.
Okay. Thank you.
Mr. Yurs?
Yeah, I just have a question on carpentry and specialties. I mean, that's a large difference between Vogel and Findorf. Is there any explanation to why they're almost exactly $200,000 apart?
Yeah, I'm not sure. Again, the budget we had put together was $592,000, and they're
Hold on just one second. We have a motion before us on
Oh,
that.
I'm sorry.
That's all right. So we'll come back to you after that.
We haven't voted yet.
I'm sorry.
So the motion before us is on item number 22, including alternate number 9. Further questions or comments on that motion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. And that motion carries. Mr. Yurs, go ahead.
Yeah, I guess the question remains the same. I just asked it at the wrong time.
That's all right.
Because it was within $5,000 of our budget, and that scope didn't really change in talking to Vogel, the estimator, I feel confident that and again, they turned in a bid based on the documents and with a bid bond, so I don't think there's a risk there, no.
Mr. McGilvray?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Bill, could you speak again to the overhead apparatus and four-fold doors CLAT and the overhead door bids? So my understanding, I think, was that CLAT had the low bid originally, but if you go with the alternates, if I'm looking at this right, you would go with overhead door. Am I reading that correctly?
No, I think I'd have to add the numbers up, but the 470 was the low number. 200.
Mr. Burns?
Yeah, as I added up the numbers, it looked like, at least for the option of including both sets of the four-fold doors, that CLAT would still be lowest at $470, $632. If I added up the overhead door bid with the 2 alternates, I was at $475, $807.
Yeah, I think it was pretty close, but right, CLAT was still the low bidder there.
Mr. McGilvray?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Then at this point, under contract package 8.3 and alternate 7, I'll make a motion to approve that alternate and the low bid to CLAT.
I think that's alternate number.
I'm sorry.
5 and 6.
That's correct, 5 and 6.
5 and 6, okay. We have a motion by Mr. McGilvray, seconded by Mr. Linder. Discussion on the motion? Mr. Touche?
So my question, just to be clear, this is bifold doors on the front and rear.
That is correct. That is my motion.
And then what's the total dollar amount for that?
Mr. Burns?
That's $470,632, and that is included in the project cost estimate.
Thank you.
Further questions on that motion? This is on the bifold doors, front and rear of the building. All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no?
No.
Was that, who's the second no? Mr. Yurs, okay. Ms. Reiki and Mr. Yurs voting no. And the motion carries. Okay. Which items do we have left, Bill? Mr. Burns?
We have carpentry and specialties, and electrical and communication wiring. I believe those are the only 2.
Any motions, questions, comments? Mr. McGilvray?
So just to be clear then, under 26, we're looking for a motion for alternate 9 also then? Is that what you're looking for? And then would you also need the motion on 5 and 6 because those have been approved?
I think we need to decide the fire pole first.
No, this is, I'm separating them out because we haven't discussed 5 or 6. We have approved the motion that included the alternates for the bifolds in the front and the rear, which you would now need to do the electrical for. And then the diesel generator would also require a different bid package for its installation. Is that correct?
Right. Mr. Burns?
Yeah, the electrical item is affected by the alternates for the fire pole, the bifold doors, and the diesel generator. Based on the actions already taken, I think to be consistent, you would want to include alternates 5 and 6 for the doors, 9 for the diesel generator, and there's still the question of the fire pole because there was some additional wiring costs related to the fire pole.
All right, then rather than have a separate motion with the fire pole.
Let's address the fire pole first,
Yeah.
and then it makes the arrest easy.
If Mr. Touche would like to take the floor, I would give him
My
that.
apologies.
That's right. Mr. Linder?
I make a motion to approve, or to award Vogel the Carpentry and Specialties bid contract package number 6, including the $39,833 for the fire pole, alternate 3.
We have a motion by Mr. Linder. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Mr. McGilvray. Questions, comments on the motion? Mr. Yurs?
I have one question and one comment. The question is, do we have to mention alternates for A and B, the partitions, that we may want to do those at a different time so that we can lock in that price, or are we just going to not mention them at all?
Mr. Burns?
I think as recommended, they could be left as options in the contract, but to be decided in the future if the maker and the second agree.
And then
Mr. Yurs?
the comment is, I don't want to get into a big argument over the fire pole, really, or not, but by law, we have to have the stairs. And if we can eliminate one possibility of a lawsuit for the city, not to mention, over $40,000 of the station, I think that might be a smart way to go.
Other questions or comments on the motion? Ms. Reekie?
I also think that the fire pole is not a necessity. It could be a potential hazard, and I'm not comfortable supporting a fire pole, and there's no indication that anyone would necessarily even use it. So it would be a nice display piece if that were to be the case, and that would be unfortunate.
Thank you. Mr. Linder?
I guess I'm looking at a little different point on the fire pole. I think 20 seconds, if it's your family member, your friends, could be extremely important. Fires, like you said, they grow pretty quickly. We spent a lot of money on this fire department, including a lot on the doors, to make them open faster, to get to response times quicker, and now another 40-some thousand, which is, what, 0.4% of the total budget, roughly. We want to cut the costs there. I'm sensitive to the cost of this overall project, and it's definitely more than I expected as well, but I think, the doors was a good one to keep, and I think this is also a good one to keep. I would be really hope you guys vote for it, because I think it's going to save 20 seconds as a significant time when your person is, and your house is on fire, or your neighbor's house is on fire.
Thank you, Mr. Linder. Mr. Yurs?
Yeah, I respect each opinion, but at the same time, I think if it's my family member that's having the fire too, if that firefighter falls down the pole and injures himself and others possibly, who's going to come to my family's aid at that point? Then I'm relying on another agency to come in. I want to ensure that our public safety personnel, to the best of our ability, can get to the trucks as safely as we can. There was an option that we talked about a long time ago to possibly flip-flop the station so that administration was upstairs and living quarters were on the main level. Preferably in a perfect world, I think that would be the way to go, because then firefighters and paramedics would simply walk to their apparatus. But now we're left to make the decision of whether they're going to go downstairs or possibly a pole. And like I said before, I want to do everything I can to create the best possibility of their safe transport from their area, where they're at in the station, to that apparatus so that they can get to that emergency.
Thank you. Other questions or comments on the motion? Mr. Linder?
I feel like I respond to Dale. I understand somebody could fall down a fire pole. Somebody can fall down the stairs too. Somebody could be carrying something up the stairs, spill it, fire gets called, nobody can go down the stairs very easily. Boom, they go on the fire pole. Gives an option. I just think it's the right way to go.
Other questions or comments on the motion? You've all heard the motion. All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, no.
No.
And that motion carries. Will the noes please raise their hands? Ms. Reiki, Mr. Touche, and Mr. Yurs. Thank you. The motion passes 4-3. Further action? Mr. McGilvray?
So if I am correct, then I would make a motion under contract package 26 to Electric Construction to approve alternate 3, alternate 5, alternate 6, and alternate 9, which would support the previous motions that passed.
We do have a motion by Mr. McGilvray. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Mr. Touche. Questions or comments on that motion? And again, that would include alternates 3, 5, 6, and 9. Seeing no questions, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. And that motion carries. Mr. Burns, have we covered all the items? Mr. McGilvray?
I do have one question. Given that we didn't receive anything from, well, we got landscaping bid from Glacier Landscaping, which is a local contractor, because it had no bond, it disqualified. But my understanding is Zander also disqualified, and we found a way to attach that language somehow to a different contract. I'm wondering if we could have the same potential for this landscaper, since there was only one landscaper that submitted. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And that's one of the outstanding items. I don't know who we would attach that under, but if there's a potential to do that, it seems like a reasonable thing to do, since we've done it in another instance. Do you have any ideas what we could put that in? Is there a way we could put it under the site, or?
You know, we certainly could. We're looking for cost savings, so some of the thought is there, if you have more bids, there's more potential for savings, whereas with the waterproofing, when there's only 2 contractors out there, and we've pretty much been only getting 1 bid in anyway, and we find Zander's prices to be pretty competitive, that's less of an unknown where it would actually end up if you had another number, and it's less amount. I mean, certainly whatever the board would prefer, but there is potential that the number could be less, where I don't think the number would be less on the waterproofing.
That's a fair enough answer, and I recognize we certainly have time between now and when we'd be landscaping.
Yeah, there's plenty of time, right.
Mr. Burns?
Yeah, one other item that I wanted to raise tonight, it's related to one of the bid package number 1 items that we had held off on making a award to the asphalt contractor because there was an alternate related to the whether the concrete was going to be just in front of the apparatus bays or also extend on the side and the rear of the apparatus bays. And it didn't affect who the low concrete contractor was, but it could affect the low asphalt contractor. We don't have it on the agenda as a decision item tonight, but I just learned in a project meeting today that could affect the amount of earthwork that's done. And so if there's any initial thoughts on whether we should do concrete versus asphalt there, it wouldn't be an official action tonight, but if there's any comments, that may be helpful as we work on doing the earthwork plan, and then we'll bring that back as a separate decision item at a future meeting. There is an additional cost for doing the all of that as concrete. I believe the difference was $97,000 net additional cost for doing that all as concrete versus asphalt. And I don't recall, Bill, which number you have plugged into the budget right now. I don't know if you know.
It doesn't include the concrete, so that would be an
Okay.
add, correct?
Okay, so that, if there's a feeling that there would be support for doing that all as concrete versus heavy-duty asphalt, any initial comments would be helpful so that we can plan accordingly.
If I could make one other comment.
Go ahead, Bill.
We did get unit prices on those as well, so there is the option of taking a look at the extent of the concrete and saying, well, maybe we don't have to do it all as concrete, and so that, with discussions with the chief and the design team, there's the option of looking at maybe scaling back the concrete, but still doing some concrete.
Thoughts, questions, comments? Go ahead, Mr. Burns.
If I may, Bill, I was just wondering, can you just touch on the reasons why there'd be advantages or disadvantages to the concrete versus asphalt?
Well, certainly concrete is more durable. You know, it's going to last longer. There's, you know, when asphalt heats up in the summer, someone's brought up the issue of like motorcycles parking and the kickstand actually sinks into the asphalt if it's a hot enough day. There is more maintenance with asphalt than there is with concrete. Part of the bad rap for asphalt usually is because the proper base and the proper proof rolling and preparation of the soil beneath the base is not done properly. So when that is done properly, which I guarantee it would be done here, you know, the asphalt is going to, you know, be a serviceable pavement. But again, you know, you can't make the argument that asphalt is going to be better than concrete. But with the proper, again, base and preparation of the substrate, maintenance can be minimized.
Other questions or comments? Ms. Ricky?
I know that this is way off base aesthetically, but I'm just wondering, since the front driveway will not be driven on as much as the parking lot, is that even an option to have that be asphalt instead of concrete?
I don't know.
We have prices
Yeah.
for it, and we haven't taken a look at whether we put down,
Bill, can you say?
whether we have concrete in the back or concrete on the front apron. We could certainly formulate those costs and get them back to you. Like Bill alluded to, our cost came in on a unit price basis, so we can vary the quantity of both aprons.
Mr. Burns?
Yeah, I was just going to suggest, and since we do have the unit quantities, as we continue to look at the value engineering options and potential cost savings, perhaps the design team can look at this and get some more specific recommendations, and we can review that at a future meeting. I guess I'm just looking to you, Bill. Is there anything that you need to have some direction on tonight, or can we kind of leave that as a open discussion item?
No, that could be left as an open discussion item, because basically they're not going to, you know, get that to that exact elevation when there's so much more site work. You know, all the vehicles, all the construction vehicles going over this area, it's going to have to be, you know, cut at a final time before that, again, that the stone base goes in anyway. So there is some time on it, and we had talked earlier today that the tentative timing is to put out the rebid package on the 5th, due on the 19th, and then coming back, I believe the next council meeting was the 25th. So at that time, we would know, you know, where we ended up with the rebids as well as the value engineering, and it could be discussed at that point. And we could also discuss, you know, within the design team, what makes sense, what should really be concrete. Are there some areas that maybe could be asphalt in lieu of concrete? And
Thank you.
present that on the 25th. Okay.
Thank you. We're good to go? All right. We have concluded the business on that agenda item. We have 2 items left, actually 3 with announcements. We are now on approval of operator licenses. Ms. Schofield, if you would, please.
Operator licenses for approval include April Gerber, Heather Albright, and Dean Klemke, all at the Quick Trip on County Highway PB.
You've heard the applicants. What's your desire?
I'll recommend approval.
We have a motion by Mr. Yurs. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Linder. Questions or comments? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Motion carried, and the operator licenses have been approved. We are on to announcements. Mr. Steiner?
I have a question before my announcement.
Go ahead, Mr. Steiner.
Mr. Burns, do we have budget dates set for the 2015 budget? I would really like to get those dates in my calendar due to some personal reasons of what's going on in my life this fall during the football season.
Mr. Burns?
Yes, at the last Finance Committee meeting, we did look at a tentative budget schedule. Several of those meeting dates early on are going to be for the Finance Committee, but we also identified dates for council meetings during the month of November. So I will email out the tentative schedule that we have to the full council at this point. There'll probably be some other meetings that need to be added in there, but at least that's a starting point.
Tentative or final?
I guess at this point, a couple dates I feel very comfortable about as far as when we would anticipate doing our public hearing and council action on the budget. The question would be, as we get into the process, if the council wants to have additional meeting dates, depending on where the discussions are, amendments. There could be other dates, but at least several of the main dates, I think, I'd feel very comfortable about at this point.
Thank you. My only announcement is we have our final concert in the park this week, Thursday at Harriet, and that will conclude our season. Well done by our Parks Department in the planning and execution of this, and I've received many fine compliments from the weather people. I appreciate what they have done for us too. It starts at 6 o'clock p.m., ends around 8, maybe a little bit later, if you people show up and dance and maybe clap. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Steiner. Other announcements? Mr. Yours?
We talked about this during Mayor's Business, but also one last time I want to mention the National Night Out is coming up on August 5th. It's from 5 to 9 p.m. and it's an entirely free event, so please bring your families and enjoy getting to know our public safety officials.
Thank you. Other comments? Other announcements, I mean? Seeing none, we are on the agenda item for adjournment. We have a motion by Mr. Yurs to adjourn. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. McGilvery. All in favor of adjournment signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Motion carried, and we are adjourned. Thank you, everyone.